Someone leaks it just days before the signing. Somebody's secretly recording this thing. They leak it.
I didn't realize that's how it leaked.
Listen, man.
Yeah.
And then, so now these two processes are not aligned. The government process is moving ahead. The political process is not nearly at the place where it should be. And so that's what for me, the big takeaway. And often people say, you know, didn't you feel hard done by the entire BELA debacle? And I say, well, no. Firstly, because I know that there are going to be many differences that the government will have to grapple with. It's just that that happened to be the first one. And number two, it then meant that the GNU had to grapple with the fact that we actually had to test. Did that thing in the statement of intent, is it real? Can we use it? Can we resolve conflict? If so, what happens? And so I'm glad that happened, because now I think, you know, because the clearinghouse, that was the first thing that went to the clearinghouse. So it was a difficult time, because of course, I mean, I'd spent like these weeks trying to make sure that the sector is stable, and now there's this big political noise. And my whole thing was, I'm just really trying to shield the sector from the political headwinds, because I just don't want that affecting the content of the work. But in the end, I think when I look back, you know, firstly, I grew a lot from the process. Secondly, I think I have a deeper understanding of what not to do when putting coalition governments together. Number three, also, I think it's important that I've now come to realize that there's a lot that can be resolved through dialogue here, and we're not good at it as South Africans. There's a lot of polarizing views, and you know, and I found that actually people hadn't read the act. People hadn't read the content of the bill itself. And so, you know, but people had these strong-held views. And I also learned a lot about leading a political party, in the sense that, you know, political parties are complicated. They're not families, right? So there are different people who hold different views within the organization. So while all of this was going on, you know, also the DA had to say, you know, who are we? We are now the second largest party in South Africa, but we are also now part of this government. Yeah. So what do we do? What do we not do? So lots of lessons, I think, that have been learned from that. So in a nutshell, how do I think that the GNU is performing? I was encouraged to see some of our inputs that coming through in the SONA last night. However, I do think it's important that there needs to be a lot more urgency. I think that South Africa, and I think that's probably why there has been almost a muted response to the SONA, because I think a lot of people, they're getting to a point of absolute saturation where they've said, a lot has been said. Yeah. So unless you move, we're actually unmoved by your words. And that for me is a signal that we have to get to work. Because people are no longer moved by even your own assessment of their own lives.
No, it does feel like the honeymoon period, if there ever was one, is well and truly over.
Definitely. I was the person who ushered us out of it.
Yeah. So I saw this recent report about 22,600 teachers and senior administrators, or vacancies for teachers and senior administrators, and this seems to be quite an important area of concern. What is being done about making sure that we have enough people in post so that teaching and learning and the education that needs to happen in the country can move forward?
Yeah, Siviwe, the problem, so as you said, one of the things that really shocked me, I think it was also just the financial problems that we find ourselves in. And you know, when you're in opposition, you often talk about, you know, this government's policy decisions are affecting, and you're saying it and you mean it, but I didn't quite realize just how impactful policy decisions of a government are. Because policies are made, budgets follow, decisions are made, and priorities are then priorities are then made. And with that, we have seen an underfunding of basic education over the past 10 years. As a result, what have provinces done? They have out of fear of industrial action, they've kept the same basket of posts. So they'll say, make an example, we've got 10,000 teachers in the province. Yes, we will have 10,000 teachers. But what they then start to do, because they don't have money to keep up with the pressures that they are facing, they then don't fill in administrators. Then they don't, so if a deputy principal leaves, they don't replace them. Because they're desperately trying to hang on to that basket of posts. Because they're trying to keep the frontline services intact, right?
I see, yeah.
And so that's how we now got to this point. But the problem with that, as you point out, is one, now we're already starting to see in some provinces where even the teacher, the frontline teacher, perhaps is not replaced. Larger classroom sizes. It's going to affect the quality of teaching and learning. As I was telling you about the school that I went to in Mpumalanga, there's no way a teacher can fully really deliver a lesson and teach children, like over 50 kids in a classroom. It's just not a thing. And so these are the things that are starting to happen. So and last year I remember I had a whole press conference essentially outlining what the financial crisis in education looks like. There was some criticism, people saying, no, well, we don't tell people these things. And I was just like, no, we have to tell South Africans exactly why it is that the situation is the way that it is. And this, for me, is what democracy is about, and why people have lost trust in public representatives, because you believe that there's certain information that people are not entitled to, but it's their lives. It's their children. It is their children who have to go to a school when there isn't proper sanitation. So you tell them what the problem is. And yes, of course, maybe you may say, well, you can say that because you knew, and so you're going to say the problems are not mine. But I was also mindful of not playing those games of saying, well, this is what I found. I said, well, this is the problem. This is how I believe we can resolve it. I put the ball back into cabinet. I am a broken record that says we have to relook at our spending priorities as a country. It's not Minister Godongwana's budget. It's ours. And we have to decide, do we fund education, policing, health, service delivery, or are we going to fund vanity projects or programs that were once there but are no longer impactful? And so a full government spending review is needed, Siviwe. The tinkering around the edges of adding a little bit of extra equitable share here, getting some private sector funding here, it's not going to cut it. In 3 years' time, at least 4 out of the 9 provinces will not be financially viable if we continue in this way.
Wow.